The Fifth Wall is a project about the interlacing of domestic and production space. It argues that their established perceptions are clashing with the way we are working, living, and communicating. Instead of proposing program within an already homogeneous environment, architecture should embrace this new conformity. The spatial parameters of a Skype interview now speak more clearly about the new forms of thresholds than Mies could do himself. Prior to the era of industrialization, work and domestic life of a family was organized vertically within the entity of the house. Weavers and watchmakers produced their goods in top shops, workshops in the attics of their townhouses with oversized windows to maximize productivity in working hours and sell them in shops on the ground floor. In the dawn of industrialization, this relationship was shifted from section to plan. Inventors had found new ways to harness nature's energy. They built new kinds of machines powered by water, steam, and coal. The new machines replaced hand-powered tools. They did the same work, only cheaper and faster. Much of the work was done outside the home, in specially designed buildings, the first factories. The factories needed to be strategically positioned to exploit natural resources, for example water, in the most efficient way. Due to this fact, together with the increasing scale and intensity of production, workers were forced to resettle in new proximities to their workplaces. 150 years later, the systematized use of the assembly line in Ford's River Rouge plant had multiplied this effect 100-folds. Ironically, it was the factory's very own product, the mass-produced car, which enabled the vast commuting infrastructure of its workers, but it also widened the gap between the two interdependent conditions of work and domesticity. This alienation turned the perception of home into an artificially constructed image of intimacy and retreat. Bernd and Hilla Becher's interest in documenting outdated industrial infrastructures in so-called typology series defined the spaces of production no longer through their initial use, but by their sensation of form and time. By making the imagery of production consumable in the hermetic environments of the gallery or the home, they also challenged the self-evidence of this relationship, asking, if the productive forces and with it their spatial typologies are lying in ruins, shouldn't our definition of domesticity suffer the same fate? Today we have entered a state which combines a new spatial proximity between work and home with that efficiency of the assembly line. This proximity does not remain within the entity of a fixed place or program, but rather travels with the worker and his or her individual as well as collective pursuits. The factory can therefore not be a space but a condition, which adapts to its surrounding and appropriates it in the favor of productive forces. While the factory produces a mishmash of personal data, individual opinions and self-regarding narratives or content, it is the byproduct or context that establishes its identity. This byproduct is the eternal presence of labor in all aspects of life, but especially in our homes. What we're being left with is the equivalent of an inhabited showroom. In this showroom, architecture becomes as ephemeral as the furniture that is exhibited within it. In face of the showroom, in which social control prevails as much as competitive exhibitionism, architecture is challenged to redefine intimacy and retreat of enclosure without isolating itself. The House of Multiple Infinities acts as an amplifier just as much as a mediator between the two poles of domestic privacy and a connected workforce. It consists of a sequence of rooms wrapped around an empty core in which all sides reflect each other into infinity. The side of the house is surrounded by another layer of infinite reflections and a 45 degrees angle to the house, so the inhabitant never sees a direct reflection of himself, but multiple versions of his environment. The worker, who is also the sole inhabitant of its own microfactory unit, simply oscillates or commutes between a narcissistic self-observation and an infinite public network of peer workers, all within the confined interiority of the room. The house is virtually a large mechanism which constantly inverts the same space according to its changing requirements. Yet, each space this mechanical system produces is related to a different mode of work, may it be of either physical or digital nature. On the other side of the inversion, all rooms have been internalized. Due to their irregular and or rounded shapes, they create a network of niches and chambers of junk space, providing the only escape from the eternal presence of labor. The domestic factory reanimates the ruins of our former houses, dwellings, and suburbias and turns them into an integral part of the globalized production circle, exceeding the modernist notion of being merely a product.
Where the dogs run, roaming suburban boys. Mother's got a hairdo to be done. She says they're too old for toys. Stood by the bus stop with a felt pen in this suburban hell.
Chapter 5 is neither epilogue to the project nor to be understood as negation of it. It is simply the acknowledgement It is simply the acknowledgement that home's relation to work and its function as retreat can no longer be defined in spatial, but only in spatio-temporal terms. The project's belief that designing a mechanism dedicated entirely to the various types of production and their seamless transition would leave pockets of space to escape into would ultimately be betrayed. Even the closet, as a domestic typology in the children's magical hideout, has potentially turned into 1 square meter factory floor. If continuity was the essence of junk space, then junk time acts as its opposite. It is freeze frame, placing on hold, crawling progress bar, interrupted sequence and collapse of the very mechanism which enforces productivity. It is a stuck spinning wheel, a spinning wheel of death, both at the same time. Time which is just too short for switching tasks, and too precious simply to be regarded as waiting.